Okay, are we getting started?
Yeah, you can go ahead and get started whenever you like. I think it's a good time.
Okay, well, my name is Kellen. I own Skyview Technologies, which is a drone mapping service provider in Central Ohio. I've been doing this for about 3 years, and Megan here recently invited me to do this presentation for all of you GIS users. So I haven't done a presentation like this on Discord before. I'm not sure how this will go, but what we're looking at here is a software platform called Drone Deploy. Is anybody familiar with that already?
I've heard this once.
Well, then let's talk about drone mapping and how that works a little bit. So, once you get your license to fly the drone, you can go out to your job site, and I'll show, let's see here, we'll fly it. You set up this polygon here, and then you can see the green lines. That's where the drone's going to fly. Takes a bunch of overlapping pictures, and then you upload those pictures into their cloud service, and it stitches everything together. It gives us plant health data, elevation data, which is cool. And it'll do a 3D model, but it won't do it on mobile, so we're going to have to skip that one. I can also take measurements and things. It cuts a section through it too, though this one's kind of messy. Anyway, basic measurements like distance, area, volume. Volume's cool. We use that in the construction industry quite a bit to get material in and out of there and figure out how many trucks they need to bring in to move that stuff. Let's get rid of that. So anyway, what we're looking at here is this place called Raccoon Creek. And in this case, we've got the village of Granville, Ohio, and they have problems with this flooding. So we got kind of a unique chance here to see how this creek floods so that they can think about how to alter the landmass there to prevent that from happening. And previously, we really didn't have any kind of way to do this or to gather all this data certainly in one shot. Like I said, we have the elevation data, which helps tremendously in understanding the slope of all this. And I've got another one here where we had some real nasty flooding in this area below, which is called Middleton, was flooded, and these cars that were in the parking lot here were underwater. So the city department is using this to try to solve that problem. I don't think they've solved it yet. So, you have any questions so far? I'll go back and show some of these other projects.
I think if you wanted to, there was one question in the chat, Kellen, and it was what sensor and what drone did you use for this particular project? The Raccoon Creek project.
I probably flew my Mavic Pro, though that's an old one. I fly a Phantom 4 Pro and I fly a Mavic 2 Pro these days. Something with a 20 megapixel camera is important, or at least 20 megapixels. People prefer a mechanical shutter for the most part, but I haven't actually had too much trouble with the electronic one on the Mavic Pro, the Mavic 2 Pro. Take a look at this one here. So being able to see all of these changes over time, like I know you guys have satellite imagery, I think, that comes through every 16 days or so and takes new pictures, but the resolution on something like this is, let's find out what it is in this case. I'll find it here in a second. Map details. There we go, 1.3 inches per pixel. I know I flew this one at 400 feet. So a lot of these fly lower than that, and the resolution's even higher. I believe this one here was also due to some flooding they have problems with. These houses over here, I guess they're kind of right in the middle of the screen there, with like water leaking into the basements. They're fairly old houses, but you can see how the land shifts that way. So that would be a problem in that area. Here are a bunch of dings. I don't know. I can't see because I'm showing the screen here.
That's okay, Tom. That's just people joining and leaving the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see here. Typically, I support this municipality who uses it more for your guys' purposes, and maybe just to watch and stuff, or trying to understand what's going on in a certain area. In this case, though, it would have to be targeted. So you can't just look up, anywhere you want and find some information. You'd have to send somebody out and actually get it. But it is repeatable. Once you drag that polygon out, you just send another drone back up and run the flight again and then process everything. And it's done with usually by the following morning. You have access to that. A link comes out. Any one of these, I could send the link, maybe post it in the chat room or something. I sent one yesterday to the maps room in case anybody wants to look at that. That's the one that I actually ran yesterday. It's a 62-acre site, a new medical facility for one of the construction companies that I work for. Let's take a look at, here we go. You see this one here. There's that flooding that I was talking about. There's really no way to capture this kind of thing prior to this. Not for the kind of money that I charge to do this, which is usually $250 gets a flight done. It costs thousands of dollars to get an aircraft in the air to get aerial imagery like this. Back to one of the construction sites. So here's this map that I flew yesterday. Come on. I have a cool overlay of this too. When you're doing construction work, they of course have drawings, and you can take those drawings and you can overlay them on the imagery here to make sure that everything's lining up the way it should be. This guy did a particularly good job with it, but I don't have a great example of it on here. If I go back a little bit, I've got a couple of them that are overlaid, and it's a little jumbled. There's the drawing. See, these roads line up pretty well, and the building.
You're viewing this in drone deploy?
Yeah, that's correct. For any of you to view it, I can go like here and to explore. Hopefully. Yeah, there we go. And then what I can do is, see, this is like slow. Okay. Share, and I can send a view only link, and it copies it. And that's usually how I deliver these things. I have a Google spreadsheet with all of the project teams or anybody who needs to access it. And I shorten it with Bitly because it's kind of long. It's a little easier to deal with, but that's about the only work that I do. I just upload everything, let it process, and then copy and paste the link with the date into a Google Sheet. And then, you can bring it up from a web browser and see whatever it is you need to see.
I was asking because it's been a while since I used Drone Deploy, but I hadn't seen that you could add like building footprints and other additional information on top of the image that you flew.
Yeah, I usually do that in AutoCAD. They give me, from time to time, they'll give that feature back to me, like they've taken it away again. So if you spend money on the higher levels of the software, there's a lot more features and export file types. Like you guys use, Esri, ArcGIS. Shape files are definitely one that'll do. It'll export contour data down to 1 foot intervals in DXF. You can get topography real easy, and it's pretty accurate. If you add ground control points, then it gets really accurate.
I guess, Kellen, there's some more questions. I'll just read them off
to you
since it might be hard for you to. So one of the questions was, where did you get the elevation data from, and how did you manage to integrate that into your project?
Yeah, so I upload the photos, and it just generates elevation data. So I don't really do anything except, so I'll mess with the colors a little bit so we can see a little easier. But that's it. That's just a standard feature. That's something the software does.
Is this a mobile app that you're using?
Yeah, this is a mobile app. You can log in, of course, like Drone Deploy is its own company, and you can go to their website, dronedeploy.com. Excuse me, and you can, sign up for an account. It's $1,200 a year at the lowest level, which is what I'm running right now. And it does, the mobile app is for flying in the field. Like, well, you can show people stuff on your phone. I've done that before when, briefly introducing it to folks before going in and doing a more thorough presentation. But you need the mobile app in order to capture the imagery. So like I was showing you before, if we go back to fly, I have a flight plan set up here, and you can see that hopefully pretty well. And I usually park kind of down here in this corner. In fact, I'm in this one, it looks like. There's me. And I just watch it fly back and forth overhead while it snaps these 686 images. It comes home when the battery's low, and then it goes right back to where it was and starts flying again. So it's a pretty simple process, with the exception of this hospital across the street and their heliport. You really have to watch for other air traffic coming through there.
So there was another question asking to explain in detail how the Drone Deploy generates the topology data from the imagery.
Oh, you got to talk to Drone Deploy software engineers on that one. I have no idea how that works.
Another one is, maybe flight plan is something that drone software handles, I assume these days, and or can you make manual flight plans?
Okay, so I guess you can fly manually within Drone Deploy if you want to go up and fly it yourself. And one reason to do that is for any of the 3D modeling stuff. And I can't show you the 3D models on the mobile app here, but I can post some links after the fact if you want to take a look at them. I've got some good ones. The 3D modeling, you need photographs of like the side of the building, for example. So you can do this, and this is what we call the lawnmower here, and this takes pictures with the camera pointed straight at the ground and just gets that, kind of Google Earth view that we have here. If I wanted to, I could add one of these enhanced 3D. I'll turn that on, and then we'll go into advanced here and show you this crosshatch. Will take oblique imagery, so the camera's angled a bit, and it tries to capture the sides of things. This would be way too many photos to process in this case. So I call this a model flight, and I call the other one a map flight. Map flights are real good for getting these 2D orthomosaic images here, and that topography, and stuff like measurements. So if you need any of the measurements, you're going to have to run a map flight, because that's the most accurate way to do that. For a nice looking 3D model, you need the model flight. If you only run a model flight, your measurements aren't going to be quite as on. It does a pretty good job still. They're probably in the mid 90s in terms of their accuracy, but we see them just about spot on with the map flight.
And which drones are you using again? Kellen, that's another question.
Yeah, I fly. Yeah, you can use just about any drone. DJI drones are compatible. Skydio drones are compatible, and now they have the Wingtra drones. Those are out of Switzerland. Those are expensive, though. So if you wanted to get into this, my recommendation would be to fly something like a Mavic 2 Pro and, purchase the lowest level of software and go out there and map the same thing over and over again until you understand how it pieces things together. You have troubles with things like overhangs. You'll get data loss with the overhangs. Glass, it doesn't do a great job with. Water is a weird one. It treats that one strangely. But for, these like solid areas, it does a very good job. And again, I haven't really explored the higher level software. Okay. The higher levels of the software, because people aren't paying enough of it yet, paying for this service. It hasn't really caught on here.
Another question that was posted is the flight plan relative to the elevation / building or a standard distance flight height?
Okay, good question. So we can go up to 400 feet maximum with the drone. The elevation is actually put in, I put that in, and that is right there, 250 feet. That changes the resolution of the overall image too. If you go up higher, your image is lower resolution. Come down lower. See here it says 0.7 inches per pixel. That's about right. Okay. Have any other questions? Thought I put that on Do Not Disturb.
And you have, this is, you work with your own company, correct?
Yeah, I started doing this in 2018. June of 2018.
It looks like we have maybe a few more questions coming
Okay.
in. I know from what we talked about yesterday is that you are also interested in how, well, I guess we'll just stick to these questions first and then I'll ask.
Okay.
Do you need a flight license? And if not, do you think it's going to be a requirement in the future? At least in Europe, this appears to be the case.
Yeah, here in the U.S., the FAA regulates that you do need a license to do commercial drone flying, which means anything for the furtherance of a business. So even if you're not charging money for it, if you're using it to, like even real estate photos, because they're going to use that for their own commercial application, you do have to have a license for that. And here in the U.S., that's a $150 test that's 60 questions. The FAA publishes the study guide on their website. You can just go download it for free, and you can learn all of the airspace requirements, weather stuff, loading. They've got some courses online that they do as well. Those are pretty helpful. So it really isn't super difficult to get into if you want to do that. I'm going to come back to Discord now.
I guess I'll go ahead and ask while we're probably getting a few more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, did you have any questions about using drones with GIS, Kellen?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we were talking about that yesterday, and
yep.
If you had any questions, maybe you can ask it here and see if anyone will give you an answer.
Sure. So I know that all of you kind of analyze GIS data, and I'm assuming it's largely like large areas. What kind of applications would there be for analyzing, the change over time of smaller areas like, we're seeing here? Like, I think my largest flight is like 62 acres. Does anybody work with anything like that?
Yeah, I work
I was
primarily
going to say,
in agriculture. Go ahead.
oh, after you.
Just real quick, I work in agriculture, and I can fly an acre field. I can fly a 50-acre field. I can, it doesn't really matter the size. There's change over time and space and any geography.
Okay. Yeah, the software does have agricultural features as well. I haven't really dealt with those much either because I don't have any agricultural customers.
So I work for a municipality. Some of the uses that I've seen in our sector is documenting infrastructure improvements. So let's say you're hiring someone to build a road, and then they charge you for like a change order or something, right? They're like, oh, we had to do this thing different, right? But if you have the imagery on a frequent enough basis, you can show, no, like you guys screwed that up. We didn't do that. That wasn't part of the plan. You guys went off the reservation, as it were.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Oh, and then some of the other things are, depending on where you're at, imagery, like you said, from an airplane is pretty expensive. So some localities don't purchase too often, and one of the use cases would be flying subdivisions as they're put in for the
Okay.
911 operators to see, right? Because if you've got like an accident at a construction site, when they open up their maps, they're just going to see a field, right? And so
Yeah.
being able to get that rough-in work to lay down the streets correctly in the GIS and all that, that is a bigger one for everyone that works with addressing and emergency services data.
That's very interesting. So I will definitely mention that to my municipal customer. Something else, utilities, when they're digging utility trenches, we can put this thing up and document the location. And like I said, we can take measurements from it. And as long as we have some kind of reference point within the flight path, so maybe the center line of a street or something, we could drag measurements off of something that's there and figure out how far away that is and actually see it while it's going into the ground, rather than guessing later on and hitting a water line or a sewage line or something and breaking it. So we have used it for that. But it sounds like okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like there definitely are municipal applications in construction documenting either existing conditions ahead of time. We had one where we have a utility line going through some private property to connect it in order to go to where it's going. And of course, the owners of that property are saying, well, you're in here digging up the ground out here. Are you going to return it back to normal? So the village has an opportunity or obligation rather to show them, yes, we're going to do that. And then they want to prove it to protect themselves later on in case anybody complains in the future. There was another question.
There was. Is there something in drone tech that you think is lacking? Start with that one first.
I mean, off the top of my head, probably not. We're waiting for LiDAR technology to come down in price. Right now, it's really expensive. It is a really cool way to get data on everything. You can see through vegetation, essentially, so you capture a lot more points in the point cloud. And it is coming along, but still a LiDAR sensor costs $50,000 or something, and the drone to put it on is about another 15. So I guess I would like to see that come down in price, but that's just going to be a matter of time.
That was actually the second question, is that things that you are looking forward to in the pipeline?
I'm sorry, what was that?
My dog. Hang on, sorry.
Okay.
Is there anything that take up most of your time using a drone?
What takes up most of my time? Mostly running my own businesses, trying to get this in front of people and get them to understand what it is and how to use it. So it isn't so much using the drone. You do have to stay on top of the regulations. Those are changing. Fortunately, they are changing in kind of a positive direction for us. And they've recently allowed flights over people are coming, flights over people and moving vehicles. And so things like delivery are coming. Those are things that I would like to get into as a pilot and expand these drone services, but I would also like to expand my reality capture services as well. So that's just kind of learning the technology and then learning about its applications takes up the most of my time.
Do you have any flight experience or flight operations experience before you started this?
Yes, I'm a private pilot, but I only have about 60 hours. I went back to school after I got my private pilot's license, and I just really haven't returned to it.
That's good to hear.
It made getting the license easy.
My comment you can relate as being a private pilot is so many people get into drones and really don't have any understanding of legality, of airspace, conflicts, getting out of the way of other things like a helicopter or an airplane. So it's good to hear that you have some private pilot licensing. That's why.
Yeah, I totally agree too. I think a lot of these folks get into this and they think, well, they certainly don't understand the gravity of the situation. You can't go messing around with this stuff. It is very real. You can't, just like I was talking about with that heliport. I've had life flights come right through my field in the past. So you have to be aware of that stuff. You can't act like this is a game. Have any other questions?
I think not.
I guess not. Yeah. Well, we can wrap it up
There is a
here.
question
Oh,
in the chat, actually. Someone mentioned.
okay.
Oh, sorry, everyone. Whenever my dogs see cats, like it's the worst. So there's one more question. It's, have you used any fixed wing drones for data collection? If so, which one do you prefer? Fixed wing or single, multi-rotor? What's your preference?
So I've only actually ever flown these multi-rotor drones, but there is a company called Censys, Censys, and they are making long range, high endurance, fixed wing drones that also have 4 rotors on them. I think they can stay in the air for about 90 minutes. I think they fly at 40 or so miles per hour, and they have a 100 megapixel camera on them. They're huge. They also have beyond visual line of sight capabilities. And if you have one of those drones and the right application for it, you can actually get a waiver to fly it beyond visual line of sight. So those look very interesting to me, and so do these Wing for One drones that I mentioned earlier. As far as which one do you have a preference for? If you're doing like large area mapping, I think fixed wing is going to be the only way to go. But those cameras, usually they don't have an adjustable gimbal, and you're only going to get the imagery pointed straight at the ground, which is fine actually in a lot of cases. But if you're doing some like building modeling, like the construction work that I do, they want to see the sides of the building and see kind of a nice 3D model. You need something that can kind of hover in place and get that imagery. So the multi-rotor ones, they're better for that.
Awesome. I think maybe we might have one more question
Mhm.
coming in. Oh, maybe not. But if anyone has
Okay.
any further questions for Kellen, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. And if there are no further questions, I really appreciate you coming to talk to us about drone. I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate you in the clubhouse rooms. You're hilarious. So thanks for
Well,
coming and teaching us something today.
sure. I hope anybody who's working in this field, who may want to get into this. I hope this clears some of this up, some of the mystery up, so that we can start to see this technology used more broadly, because it's really exciting, and I think it's going to be really useful.
I agree completely. But yep, I think that's it. So
All right.
thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry with the impromptu, especially my poor mod. He hates me. But thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it, and great presentation done with a lot of great information. I'm sure everyone also enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me out.
No, thanks for coming, and thanks for everyone dropping by. Dave, did you have a question?
No, let's say thank you. Actually, I have a meta question. Where
Okay.
are these questions people keep asking in the chat?
Oh,
Is it?
So if you look to maybe 1 or 2 channels up, there's a channel called No Mic Voice Chat. I'm sorry, I should have explained that better. That's typically during the presentation, where if you have a question, you can drop it, and normally we always answer questions after the presentation, but Kellen had a hard time using the mobile, so I just decided to BB. There you go. You found it.
Amazing. No, that's great. Thanks.
No worries. Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks, Kellen.
Thank you.